afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible? Are you people able to hear my voice, ma'am? Okay, good. We'll quickly go with the review of whatever we have learned earlier. Uh, quickly having a we were talking about keys, and we have seen this particular diagram, where in this ER diagram we have seen that there are certain attributes listed up here. There are two entity sets here and one relationship. So for each entity set and relationship, there are certain attributes listed here. And we were trying to determine which of these attributes, which one or two or combination of one or two can be used to uniquely identify each pattern. Since this is entity set, we need to identify each entity. We are going to take one attribute or a combination of attributes to uniquely identify the row. So in that regard, we have seen that if we combine all the attributes at a time, then that particular key is called as super key. Since if we combine name, address, city, zip, number, telephone number, and date of birth, it will uniquely identify that particular person pattern. So we need not need any other key actually. But if we have all the attributes combined as a super key, then it will become a trouble for us to mention every time all the attributes. If it is one single, for example, if I need to uniquely identify each student, if I combine the student name, pin number, marks, and total and everything, and it definitely uniquely identifies the student. But for every time to ask for the student or to call the student, I need to, if I'm using each and every detail, will it be convenient enough for me to use it? No. So for that regard, we will not consider the super key over here. We will try to minimize the number of combinations, number of attributes in that particular super key as much as possible. And we will try to make sure that the least combination and which is the best one is taken as a primary key. So all those combinations will act like candidate keys, and out of those candidate keys, one will be selected which will be called as primary key, and the remaining of the keys except the primary key will be called as alternate keys. Similarly, I said that we'll try to represent relations not in terms of its attributes, but by keeping the primary key of the first entity set as a another key over here as foreign key in this second entity set. So whenever we are trying to include primary key of one entity set into another entity set, over here this primary key will become the foreign key. So we have seen that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 definitions for keys. But some other textbooks, or let us say some other websites, have online resources have given different names to the keys, different notational formats. One is composite key. Composite primary key means if the primary key is not built up of one single attribute, let us say this telephone, it is unique, but suppose it is not being taken as a primary key, it is being combined with the name, let us say. Then in that regard, we can say that this is a combination, composite. So it will become a composite key. Similarly, surrogate key. Surrogate keys are those which are generated automatically. These are the numbers, for example, your bank account numbers. Bank account numbers cannot be given allocated by a human being. For example, if the bank account number is given by a human being, that human being, even if that human being is very careful and very skilled enough, he may keep a track of 1000 numbers in his mind or her mind and try to make sure that those 1000 numbers are never repeated, because bank account numbers cannot be repeated for any person. They need to be unique. What about 10,000? Can a human being handle 10,000 entries? and making sure that it is not being repeated and to whom what was given. Can it be tracked? No. For that reason, these primary keys are automatically generated by the computer. Those primary keys which are automatically generated, automatically incremented, are called as surrogate keys. Usually they will be like a sequence, just like your PIN numbers. They will be in sequential order, 1, 2, 3, so on, 1805 for CP, so on. Then we have got natural keys. These natural keys are defined by the human beings and are usually built up based on the real world objects. Next one is candidate key. We have just before seen it, and foreign key. I'm just reading the definition of foreign key. It should not be mixed up with the primary key. Make a point over here. An attribute in one table whose values must be the primary key in another table. That means, suppose this name is the primary key of this pattern. If I am copying this name column back into books column to show that there is a relationship between them, then names column here, if it is there, will be called as foreign key here in the books table. But name in the patterns will be the primary key for the patterns. Is it clear? We'll include the foreign key here just to show that there is a relationship between. So I was telling that out of all the combinations, we'll select one key which is as a primary key. It's based on these factors. What are those factors? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What are those 7 factors? First factor is that first criteria is it should have not non-null values. That means there cannot be any entry in that column which is blank. For example, your PIN number. Can there be any student whose PIN number is null, is not having any PIN number? No, cannot be null. So whenever we look at a particular column, we should make sure that that column which is not having any missing values or null values is taken as a primary key. Second thing, second criteria for primary key is those columns which are having unique values, which is not containing any repeated values, is to be taken as a primary key, because the whole and sole purpose of primary key is to uniquely identify that row. If the values are repeated, can we identify what is that row? If the roll numbers are repeated for 2 students, can we distinguish between them? No. So third one is it should be non-intelligent. Non-intelligent in the sense, as I said earlier, we were not using telephone number for representing as primary key because it was giving some intelligence to outsiders, some factual part to the outsiders. It was revealing your security, privacy to the outsiders. That's why we did not had it. Third one, those columns whose values will not change for a long time, those type of or it will not change at all, those type of columns should be taken as a primary key. Why I'm telling is because suppose you allocated a, let us say, pin number to a student, and suppose that pin number, if it is a primary key and if it is changing, can I use the previous value to identify the student? No. So there will be one criteria, that is no change over time, which should be uh, valid enough to select a particular column as a primary key. Next one is single attribute. We should make sure that even if the combinations are made, those combinations are minimum number of column combinations. The more the number of columns, the more the problem will become to make use of it as a primary key. And the next one is preferably numeric. Preferably numeric in the sense, if we have alphabetical combinations, it becomes very difficult for comparing two different rows. We are trying to identify two rows based on the primary key, right? Whenever we want to say that this row is unique from the other row, we have to compare these two values, whether they are same or not. Numbers can be computed very fast, but if it is alphanumerical or alphabetical, it becomes very difficult for us to compare them. We need to have lots of combinations to be compared. But if it is numerical, it can be done very fastly. That's why we will say preferably numerical in nature. Next one is security compliant. Security compliant, just as we said, that primary key should be such that it should not reveal your identity. It should not let your privacy be overtaken. So that type of nature or characteristics should be there for primary key. Quickly, let's revise back. If a attribute is to be taken as a primary key, then it should have the characteristics that it should have non-null values. Non-null values are those which are not messing up. Next is its value should be unique. It should not have any intelligence inside it. Its value should not change over time. Mostly it should be single valued attributes and preferably numerical in nature and security compliant. Next coming topic is about participation constraints. Participation constraints in the sense, suppose uh, we have got, for example, let me have this diagram. I have here one entity set called as students, and there is one more entity set here called as instructors, and there is a relationship between them as advising. So the our relationship is advising, but how many students can be interacting at a time with the instructor? A student interact with more than one faculty. That particular ratio, one student is to one faculty. This ratio is called as participatory constraint. Participatory constraint. Constraint means any condition. There should be one student interacting with one faculty only. But whereas when it comes for instructors participating in this relation advising, there may be zero instructor participating here. Suppose there is principal, he will not interact with any advising activities with the student, but he is an instructor. He is an instructor for overall college. Similarly, at the maximum, how many students can the instructor can interact with? Seven students. Usually, when we go for any universities or such like that in higher studies, there will be limitation of students per faculty, and the basic limitations is that there should be 1:1 ratio for the faculty and the training. We say them as training there. So here also, when we say these students are there graded into there is a grades relationship. How many students can take up the courses? There can be one student participating in this grading, and at a maximum, how many students can be there? 45. So if we take into our course into account, there can be one student in the class, or there can be a maximum of 60 students in the class. So this ratio, minimum is to maximum, will tell us what is the minimum number of candidates who are involved in this relationship from this particular entity set, and how many maximum number of participants can be participating into this relationship set. Is it clear what is a relationship set? So let us just get back to the definition of it. This participatory constraint. Uh, suppose here the definition is not so clear cut, but whatever I said, please note it down. It's being recorded, so you can just review it and get to know what is the definition. Basically, I'm repeating. Participatory constraint is a ratio of the number of participants from an entity set participating into a relationship with another entity set. This is the clear-cut definition. So here is the ratio given over here, 1:1, and here 0:7. If we try to have a look in terms of U and B, U and B being the two entity sets and R being the relationship among them. Suppose from U entity set, minimum number of participants are P and maximum number are Q. From the V entity set, minimum are M and maximum are N. Then we classify the relation based on this below mappings. What are these things? We say a relation is one to one or one to many or many to one or many to many. If, for example, one to one, if P is equal to 0, number of minimum participants from U is 0 and maximum is 1. That means only one participant at max can participate here. And minimum from the V is 0 or maximum is 1. That means 1:1. correct? Similarly, one to many. So minimum is 0, maximum from u is greater than 1, 1 to many. So read it from this end. U is here and V is here. Many here and here is 1. Okay. Now 1 to many, this is U, this is V. 1 at U, many over here greater than 1. From many to many, both should be greater than. Simple. Done with this part. So based on this, we will classify the relations into 4 categories. Do remember, I am reading it from reverse order. U to V. U to V. Minimum 0, maximum 1. Minimum 0, maximum 1. Similarly, over here, many to 1. So it is minimum 0, maximum greater than 1. Minimum 0, maximum 1. From here 1 to many. So again U to V. P equal to 0, Q equal to 1, M equal to 0, N greater than 1. Many to many. P equal to 0, Q greater than 1, M equal to 0, N greater than 1. So based on this, we'll classify into 4 categories. The relationships are classified into 4 categories. So now coming on for relationships. Classify the entities over here, entities and relationships further. Say that an entity set is strong if it is independent of any other entity set. If its existence is not dependent on any other entity set. For example, if I want to say that a particular student is strong student, I will not say that based on its build quality or something like that. I will say that that student is strong in subject. What I mean, that student is not dependent for any other student for copying or something like that. Similarly, if I say that student is weak student, that means I'm telling that that particular student is depending on any other student for taking help to perform. Similarly, if an entity set is not dependent on any other entity set for its existence, then it is called as strong entity set. Similarly, if an entity set is depending on another entity set for its existence, then it is called as weak entity set. Now, when it comes for relationship set, we have said that there are 4 categories of relationships. One to one, one to many to one, and many to many. But here, I will say 2 types of relationships. One is normal relationship, another is identity relationship. Normal relationship is just whatever we have learned till now. Whenever I say there is weak entity, it is going to depend on another entity, right? So if it is going to depend on another entity, we say that there is a relationship between these two, the weak and the strong. That relationship that exists, association that exists between them is called as identity relationship. Is called as identity relationship. The relationship that exists between the weak entity and the strong entity, the association that exists between the weak entity and the strong entity is called as identity relationship. Okay. Now, there are different notations to be used. For example, as a normal entity set, we used the rectangle. Similarly, for weak entity set, we will use the rectangle, but with the dashed lines. Okay, clear? For example, in this particular diagram, what I have shown here is loans entity set. Loans is an object that exists in the world, right? Students is one more entity set. Now tell me, if no student is taking any loan, will the loan entity set exist in our database? No. But for the loan entity set to come into existence, there should be at least one student taking the loan. So loan entity set is dependent on the student's entity set. That means there is some relationship between them. Student borrows loans. This borrows becomes the identity relationship for us. Fine to everyone? So here I have kept some theoretical points. You people just quickly go through these theoretical points and till here, I think what's in Next topic is very important. I want to just give some time over here. You people go through it. If there is any doubt here, please ask. You can keep it in your chat box. Does anyone has any doubt in this particular topic? What is entity set? What is a relationship set? How many types of relationship sets are there? How many types of entities are there? No? Okay, good. Now coming next to the topic, specialization, generalization, and aggregation. This is very important to be learned. It is very easy, very easy. For example, I say I'm a human being first. Now I'm classifying myself based on my specialization that I'm a teacher. Next, I'm classifying myself based on my nature that I'm male. Next, I'm classifying myself as a male teacher. I'm telling that I'm teaching for CP department. So when I am taking the human being, I'm at the top level. Further classifying I'm male. Further classifying I'm teacher. Further classifying I'm CP teacher. Further classifying I'm RDPMS teacher. So when I go downwards, when I specialize myself further in the hierarchy, then it is called as that effect of hierarchical progress is called as specialization. That is top-down approach design. Similarly, I will say that I'm a RDP Means teacher. Similarly, I will say I'm a teacher in CP department. Then I will say I'm a teacher. Then I will say I'm a male faculty. Then I will say no, I'm a human being. When I'm trying to generalize my characteristics, then it becomes my generalization effect. Simple. So, specialization is a top down approach where you will take one entity and you will try to classify that entity into multiple entities. You will try to put them into its specialization categories. For example, there is a person. Now, that person is having certain name, street, and city. But now you are classifying it based on the employees in the bank or customers in the bank. Both are persons, whether temporary employee or permanent employee. So when I'm taking a person and classifying them in the top-down approach, then I'm telling that I'm applying some specialization. That specialization in terms of ER diagrams is denoted with the downward uh, this downward triangle is called as is a relationship. You have remembered that the relationship is a rhombus, right? Same over here. This specialization is represented with a downward triangle with a is a label inside it. This is must and should to be noted down. This is a relationship triangle is used to represent that there is a person entity and it is being classified into further two categories. What does it imply? It implies that whatever attributes are there for this person, technically it says that whatever attributes are there for this person are also there for this employee and customer. So we need not mention it again here. We'll say what is its specialization, why we categorized it. We'll just mention it. So this becomes a superclass and this becomes a subclass. Clear now? Now agree. One more thing. If we go from downwards to upwards, it becomes generalization. In that there are employees and customers, both are having certain characteristics, but it is going in the we are trying to combine these two based on their common characteristics and give it a common name. That is a person. So we'll depict the person here and we'll say what are the common attributes here and we'll just draw this diagram. Now, for Specialization, there was a downward triangle, right, with a easy relationship written over the label over there. For generalization, the same notation is used. It's not upward triangle. There is no upward triangle in the ER diagram. Do remember here. The triangle will be always downwards with is a label inside it. It all depends how we are looking at this diagram. If we are looking from top to down design, it becomes specialization. If we are going from superclass to subclass, it becomes specialization. If we are going from subclass to superclass, then it becomes generalization. Is it clear for everyone? Is there any doubt in this super specialization and generalization? I'm stressing here because these are very important questions that will be asked in your exams. No? Now coming on for aggregation. We said that if a entity is here, entity set is their employee, and there is one more entity set called as job. There is a relationship between these two that employees works on job. Similarly, if there is one more entity set called as branch, I can say that employees works on branch. There is a manager entity set which manages the employee, also manages the branch, also manages the job. Okay. But manager also works, right? That also manages the works also. It may be some kind of work that is there inside the company. So when we are telling that two entities are there, they are linked together with a relationship, isn't it? If these two are there, there is a linkage among them using a relationship. But what about this manages and the works on? Can there be any relationship between two relationships? No. Is there any association between associations? No. We cannot show it. But indirectly, we can say that there is a manager who manages the works also. So what we need to do is, what is this works? This work is pertaining to the employee, branch, and the job. So this whole part, what we will do is, we will take this whole part as one entity and try to link them together. The below diagram is doing the same part. So whenever we want to say that there is an aggregation is a process of combining of multiple entities and relationships, trying to relate it with another relationship. Clear? So we'll try to combine them into one single relationship here. What's the definition? Aggregation is the abstraction through which relationships are treated as higher level entities. Aggregation is an abstraction through which relationships are treated as higher level entities. Here we wanted to have a relationship between these two, right? So we cannot link them together because these are two separate relationships. What we'll do, we'll combine them as one single entity, and we'll say that this manager is linked to that particular entity, combined higher level entity through managers. Okay. Now we are going into further details of relationships ER model. These are the diagrammatic notations which we need to remember in our mind to say that, to interpret what is the ER diagram, to draw the ER diagram. Normal entity sets are depicted with a rectangle, whereas an attribute, normal attribute is depicted using a with the name of the attribute inside it. Here also E is the name of the entity set. When it comes for a weak entity set, we need to make use of double rectangle. Same way, there may be any attribute which is having multiple values. For example, nowadays you are having two SIMs in your mobile. You are having two phone numbers. Those are for one single person only. So Instead of telling two separate attributes for number one, for number two, I'll just say multi-valued attributes. So I'll just show that phone number with a double ellipse. Relationship, normal relationship is depicted using a rhombus or a diamond sign. There is one more category of attribute called as derived attribute. These are the attribute whose values are calculated. For example, age of a person. Age of a person can be calculated using date of birth, correct? So I can have one attribute called as date of birth, but from this one, I'll derive what is the age of the person. Here, so whenever there is derived attribute, we'll use dashed ellipse. We'll use dashed ellipse. Clear? Now, when we have normal relationship, it is using a normal rhombus. If it is a identity relationship, a relationship among weak and strong entity set, do remember weak entity set is represented using I said earlier dashed rectangle, right? It is also represented using double rectangle. So when double rectangle is being used, we'll use double rhombus for identity relationship. But when dashed ellipse is, dashed rectangle is used, we'll use dashed rhombus for depicting it. It all depends on our notation. Different companies follow different notational formats. But the basic ones are these parts, standard ones. Now, till this point, I think all the diagrams are clear. Here comes one more thing. Participatory constraints we have seen. If I say that there is one entity which is such that all the members of this entity set, all the entities in this entity set are participating in this relationship, then it is called as total participation. It is called as total participation. So there will be double line given over here, not single line. Same way, if there is only one less than the total number of entities in this entity set participating into this relationship, for example, there are 60 students participating in a particular exam. If all the 60 students participate in the exam, then I can say it's total participation. If there are only 50 students who are participating in the exam, then I can say it's not total participation, partial participation. Okay, same way over here in our class, there are more than 100 students, practically speaking, more than 110 students, but only 51 are present. One is myself, only 50 students are there. So is it total participation? No, partial participation. Our class will be finishing in within 5 minutes. So quickly I will finish this particular diagram, and then I will start another class for you again. So please rejoin back with the link given further. Similarly, if I have a primary key is also an attribute, right? It will have an underline for it to show that, to differentiate it from all other normal attributes. One more point. If there is any weak entity, set, that weak entity set should also have certain characteristics with it, certain attributes with it. Those attributes will be underlined. Those primary keys of this weak entity set will be underlined, but with a dashed underline. Okay, those are also attributes, but they will not be taken as a primary key as a whole. Those will be called as discriminatory attribute of weak entity set. Actually, discriminatory attribute is the primary key of this weak entity set only, but it cannot be taken as a primary key as a whole because its existence depends on the normal entity set, strong entity set. That's why we will not say it as a primary key, we will say it as a discriminatory attribute of weak entity set. If there is many to many relationship, we'll just have two lines without any arrows. Wherever one is coming, many to one or one to many, we'll have an arrow on that side. If it is one to one, two side arrows. If it is cardinality limits or participatory constraints, we will mention 1 is to 0 is to 1, something like that. Similarly, low is low 2 dots h. This is a diagrammatic notation. Then if a role is to be mentioned, what is the role over here? We'll mention in above the line. Specialization or generalization, we will have a downwards triangle. If there is total participation, total generalization, then we will have, or total specialization or total generalization, we will have two lines here. If this is having one single line only, then it is disjoint generalization or specialization. I hope this diagram is clear for everyone. Similarly, we will have few more symbols used over here. Entity can be represented as a downward rectangle with its attributes listed inside and name above it. Primary key will be the first one listed, and below will be candidate keys or alternate keys. If it is many to many, we will have asterisks on both the sides, or we can have this type of arrow notations. If it is one to one, clearly 1 1 will be written, and we'll just have zero arrows nature. If it is many to one, asterisk and one. So these are different notations which will be used. Here is a sample banking ER diagram which I have kept. It will become, look very difficult to analyze, but you need to figure it out based on first calculating how many entities are there. Then you need to see how many relationships are there. I'm pausing at this moment. Very next class will be shortly started up. I'm going to create the link and send it to you. Is there any doubt till here? Okay, fine. How many